President Truman and the atomic bomb. When Harry S. Truman became president in April 1945, he was advised to set up a committee for advice about the future use of atomic weapons. This became the Interim Committee, which first met on May 31st, 1945. Truman was faced with certain dilemmas about the war with Japan. Following the Yalta agreements, Truman knew that the USSR would declare war on Japan by August 8th, and he was also concerned that the Soviets' power would grow in Asia. He did not want to see the continued spread of communism. In addition, some of his military advisors had warned that the USA needed to invade Japan, something which would have caused the death of hundreds of thousands of US soldiers. Using the atomic bomb offered a chance to end the war quickly. Truman had various options with regard to the surrender of Japan. The USA could: 1. Invade Japan; 2. Negotiate surrender on mutual agreeable terms; 3. Assume that the entry of the USSR into the war linked with Japan's growing inability to wage total war would bring about surrender; 4. Demonstrate the power of the atomic bomb over the Bay of Tokyo; or 5. Use the bomb on Japan itself to immediately end hostilities. Truman received a report from the Interim Committee in early June, and it stated that the atomic bomb should be used as soon as possible against Japan. Truman accepted his decision, and although he heard strong arguments against using the bomb from some military advisors and scientists, he discounted them. Truman had warned in July Potsdam that it was essential to receive unconditional surrender from the Empire of Japan, or Japan would face prompt and utter destruction. At the same time as Truman was considering the use of the atomic weapon, the U.S. military planners were planning to invade mainland Japan. Operation Downfall on November 1st, 1945. The first stage of the operation would have been the invasion of the island of Kyushu, which would be followed by the invasion of Honshu. In Japan, the leadership was divided between the war group, who wanted to fight to the death, and a peace group, led by Prime Minister Suzuki, who wanted to negotiate an end to the war. The government made secret approaches to the USSR to act as a go-between between the USA, but without any progress. On August 6, 1945, President Truman ordered the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The bomb killed about 70,000 and wounded about the same number. The Japanese still refused to surrender and faced invasion in Manchuria when the USSR declared war. Failure to surrender led the USA to drop a second atomic bomb on Nagasaki on August 9th. This time it killed about 40,000. The USA was preparing a third bomb to be ready for August 19th, but the Japanese surrendered on August 14th and signed the instruments of surrender on September 2nd, officially bringing the Second World War to a close. At the time of the bombings, the orthodox view was that the attacks of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were brought, and they were done, to bring the war to a swift end. Allied Pacific war planners had estimated that given Japan's determination and fighting spirit, an invasion of the main Japanese islands could have resulted in more than 1 million Allied casualties. However, revisionists have refuted this, arguing that there were several other key reasons why the bombs were used, not the least the issue of US-Soviet relations and the USSR's position in Asia. Truman faced many senior advisors and military commanders who offered conflicting advice. He had to consider moral and political issues as well as the possibility of a huge US casualties. Winston Churchill, then Prime Minister of Britain, supported Truman's decision to use the bomb, as the Japanese and their army, they were large and powerful, and that fighting would not end until late 1946. Historians such as Herbert Feist, writing in Japan Subdued, the Atomic Bomb and the End of World War II, 1966, put forth the orthodox view that Truman made his decision on purely military grounds in order to ensure a speedy victory. David McCullough, the author of a biography of Truman, 1992, also accepted this. William O'Neill, in A Democracy at War, 1993, stated that the Japanese military had no intention of surrendering and meant to fight to the last man, woman, and child. He also points out that the Japanese military did not consider surrender even after Hiroshima. In the 3 months after Truman became president, the USA had sustained nearly half of the casualties inflicted upon it by the Japanese in 3 years of fighting. Robert J.C. Butau, writing in Japan's Decision to Surrender, 1954, stressed the crucial importance of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in bringing about surrender. Boothell's text is still seen as an important part of the debate. Alonzo L. Hamby, writing in Man of the People, 1995, said that Truman was motivated by the thought of more and more U.S. soldiers dying. Richard Frank has argued in Downfall, The End of the Imperial Japanese Empire, 1999, that the USA would have changed its mind about invading Japan in November 1945 because the latter was still a power to be reckoned with. Frank writes that the bomb's use was better than all existing alternatives and saved not only Allied lives, but also Japanese lives as well. Sadao Asada and Professor Barton Bernstein have also argued that there was a possibility that Japan would not have surrendered by November, hence the atomic bomb ended the conflict. Truman has been criticized on several grounds for his decision. Military advisors told Truman that Japan was a defeated nation and that the U.S. naval blockade of the home islands meant that its war effort would wane quickly. Reportedly, there were also 3 million Japanese soldiers stranded in China who could not return to Japan to defend the homeland. Senior commanders from all parts of the army, Eisenhower, MacArthur, Lee He-king, Nimitz, Arnold, and Lee May, opposed its use. Admiral Lee saw the use of the bomb as no different than using poisonous gas or bacteriological weapons. Indeed, some of them saw that the USA was surrendering its moral high ground if it became the first to use such a weapon. Revisionist historians have written that the use of the atomic bomb had more to do with keeping the USSR out of Asia and warning them of the military power that the USA now possessed. The publication of the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey report bolstered this view. After the war, it concluded that the U.S. blockade would have obliged Japan to surrender by November. Historian Gal Alperovitz in Atomic Diplomacy, 1965, wrote that Truman knew it was unnecessary, and there was evidence by late summer of 1945 that Truman was engaging in atomic diplomacy by trying to intimidate the USSR. The Soviet historian Vadim Nekrasov, in The Roots of European Security, 1984, stated that the U.S. decision to use the bomb was simply to show its power to the world, especially the USSR. Tsuyoshi Hasegawa in Racing the Enemy, Stalin, Truman, and the Surrender of Japan, 2006, has written that Truman used the atomic bomb to win the war against Japan without Soviet assistance, thus limiting Soviet expansion in Asia. He argues that it was the anticipated Soviet participation in the war which had the greatest influence on Japan's decision to surrender. These arguments have also been supported by several other historians, especially Martin Sherwin in A World Destroyed, Hiroshima and Its Legacies, 1975. Critics have also said that Truman used the bomb because it cost $2 billion in development and there had to be some return on such high investment. Importantly, Truman was aware of the peace feelers that the Japanese government had made towards the USSR. Another theory of the motive for using the bomb is that it avenged Pearl Harbor and the ill treatment of U.S. soldiers. John Dower, War Without Mercy, Race and Power in the Pacific, 1986, and Ronald Takaki, Hiroshima, Why America Dropped the Atomic Bomb, 1995, have even cited racism as a reason behind Truman's decision to use the atomic bombs. When President Roosevelt died in April 1945, his successor, Harry S. Truman, had opposing views about Stalin, the USSR, and communism. President Truman disliked communism and was determined to be tough on Stalin and the USSR at Potsdam. Yet at Potsdam, Stalin was not cowed by Truman or the weapon of awesome destruction. Truman's decision to use the atomic bomb has been seen as a means of intimidating Stalin because it gave the US military superiority and therefore cooperation with Stalin was no longer needed. I mean, imagine had the US not been able to been the one to defeat Japan and had sought Soviet cooperation, and then Japan would have been divided like Germany after World War II. Today, it would be like in North and South Korea or in North and South Vietnam. It could have become communist dirt poor North and unprosperous capitalist South. That did not happen, and it was because of Truman's decision to use the atomic bombs to bring the war in the Pacific to a swift end.